Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the last news dose of 2025. I hope everybody has a great new year, but make sure to be safe out there. Just do that much. But yeah, it's been an interesting year for gaming, to say the least. A lot has changed, and 2026 could potentially continue that evolution. I mean, I've even heard some rumors about maybe some more multi-platform plans. Maybe not just from Xbox this time, but we'll see what happens with all that. However, what we will talk about today is connected to that, at least to some extent, because a former Sony boss is actually encouraging PlayStation and even Nintendo to band together with Xbox to go completely multi-platform across the entire industry. So this does kind of beg the question, is Xbox right for the direction that they've been going in, and will PlayStation and Nintendo ultimately follow suit over time? First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with a surprise showcase that's actually set for next Thursday. Yeah, the first gaming showcase of the year will be early in 2026, though this comes from a completely new player. You can see the announcement here on Twitter, which reads, "Introducing a new type of game showcase, the New Game Plus Showcase. It's creator-led, no paid placements, genuine excitement and conversation, exclusive game footage and interviews, 45 games coming to you on January 8th. So it almost reads like a response to Jeff Keighley showcases. You know, they want to do something similar, but they want to make it more about the actual games and the creators that made them, and less about the money, the spectacle, and the ads. Now, you can take that as you will, but they will have 45 games, one of which seems to be Crimson Desert, which, hey, I'd say is actually a pretty decent game to get for a completely new showcase without a reputation. Now, admittedly, I wouldn't go in with the expectation that this showcase will be filled with a ton of big-time announcements, but it could still be fun to pay attention to when it airs next week. If anything else, I hope it does well so they can secure more announcements for their next showcase later down the road. And who knows, if they can build this event up over time, maybe they could offer some real competition in terms of fun showcases in the future. Moving on here, though, I guess this is just kind of the year of plagiarism or something, because this will be the second time that we've seen a big-time company kind of get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Now, to be completely fair here, there's only accusations for the time being. We do need to wait and see if the accusations amount to anything, but what's happening here is that Battlefield 6 recently released its new Battle Pass, and fans quickly took notice of one skin that it includes being the Objective Ace skin. See, the problem is that fans quickly connected it to the Call of Duty Ghost character back in 2013. In fact, you can see the comparison here, which, I mean, it's pretty easy to see the resemblance. I mean, some of the stitching almost seems one-to-one, which is kind of a crazy coincidence, especially because if they actually plagiarized its art as they're being accused of, I don't see how the artist in question didn't foresee fans catching on, because, you know, a lot of Battlefield fans also play Call of Duty. So it's not shocking to think that fans would quickly catch on to their similarities. Now, some people are also accusing them of possibly feeding Battlefield 6 with AI, and maybe that's how this skin came to be. Maybe it wasn't just an artist copying previous work, but maybe it was AI instead. Not necessarily that makes the situation better, but either which way, there's definitely an uncanny resemblance between the two, and we'll see what happens with all this. For now, though, there's nothing really more than accusations, but let me know what you all think about this. Do you think that they plagiarized Call of Duty Ghost, or do you think that fans are just reading too much into the accused resemblance? Oh, and the last couple of years has been real good for Silent Hill fans. After a long, and I mean a long, hiatus, we got back-to-back AAA releases in Silent Hill 2 Remake, and then the brand new Silent Hill F, both of which were incredible games. However, apparently, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because the Silent Hill producer recently said, continuing from the release of Silent Hill 2 in October of 2024, we were able to deliver Silent Hill F in September of 2025, putting the Silent Hill series back on track. Including announced and unannounced titles, we aim to release titles at a pace of about one title per year. And the reaction to this online has been fairly critical. Looking through the comments, instead of there being a lot of excitement, a lot of fans instead expressed their concern because a more annual Silent Hill could lower the quality over time, which, okay, I can understand that concern because that is something that we have seen from various annual franchises in the past. However, Konami's plan seems to be to license out Silent Hill to various different developers for different types of experiences. So I do want to point out that in reality, you're probably only going to get the one brand new classic style of experience like Silent Hill F every 4 to 5 years. And then in between that time, kind of similar to the Resident Evil series, there's going to be remakes and then possibly some smaller spin-offs as well, like the recent The Short Message and Ascension games. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you think that that's just too much for Silent Hill, or are you happy that Konami is putting Silent Hill on such a high pedestal? All right, now let's just go and talk about the future of gaming, because this ultimately was one of the biggest stories of 2025. You know, the new Xbox and the new direction that they're taking their hardware in. Now, some people agree with what they're doing, whereas others absolutely hate it. I'm going to leave that up to you and what direction you prefer, but I want to preface today's topic because former PlayStation boss Shawn Layden had some very interesting things to say about exclusivity and what console makers need to do to break the ceiling that they've kind of capped themselves in since the 90s. In a recent interview, he said, "We talk about gaming as being this $250 billion industry, which it is, and have hundreds of millions of users, which it does. But of course, that includes if you're playing Wordle, you're a gamer. If you're playing Candy Crush, you're a gamer in that number. But the number of discrete consoles sold over any particular generation caps out at about 250 million. If you line up all of the PlayStation 1s, the Sega Saturns, and Nintendo 64s, and you go by generations, it's all about 250 million. The one time that it popped to almost 300 was the generation that had the Wii, and people thought that you could buy Wii Fit and lose weight. So we got some non-traditional gaming audience to buy into the gaming industry at that time. But that was an anomaly, and we've still kind of flattened out. So we need to crack that cap, that barrier." He then talked about how movies broke their cap that held them back, and that was by making a universal standard for all media. Whether that be VHS, DVD, or in today's world, the Blu-ray, you can go out and buy a copy and then play that movie on any media player that supports that specific format. In other words, you can buy a Sony Blu-ray player, an LG, or a Panasonic. It doesn't matter to the consumer because your media is going to work on everything despite the manufacturer. Instead of consumers choosing a device based on exclusivity, they instead choose it based on features, price, and quality. And that's what Shawn Layden ultimately wants to see from the game industry. He continued on and said that I think we need to get into a world where we have a gaming format. Maybe it just comes from PC. Maybe we find a way to do it all in a Linux kernel or something. And then we have a consortium around that. We have licensing programs which allow other manufacturers to build into that space, and then you can talk about real numbers moving. You know, that's how you get to the ubiquity of the toaster. But right now, I think we're trapped in this containment field. And trapped is a very astute word for him to use because on one side, what he's basically describing is Valve and Xbox's vision for the future. To them, the operating system itself is what's becoming the ecosystem rather than the hardware. Now, the next Xbox is likely going to be Windows-based, whereas Valve is more so pushing for Linux. But in both cases, their ideas are very similar on paper. They're both plug-and-play consoles, which makes them highly accessible, and they're both very open platforms that supports multiple storefronts with an OS that can be licensed out to different hardware makers, or at least that's what we've been hearing. So if you think about it, Shawn Layden's hope for the future is kind of already in the works to some degree. But the bigger problem with his vision, and I think he knows it, is that unless Nintendo and PlayStation comes together to support that vision too, then it doesn't really solve the issue that he originally brought up. Yes, Xbox is going into that direction, but they've become a minuscule part of the 250 million cap that he's referring to. the vast majority of consoles that's been sold over the last 5 years has been from PlayStation and Nintendo. So in order for his vision to become true, then Nintendo and PlayStation would need to change their philosophy and how they ultimately do business, which is where things start to become very tricky. On one side, he's basically rooting for a world where exclusives become a thing of the past, and we get this super console, if you will, or just a PC that supports everything. But he used the word trapped, I think, for a very good reason. And that's because PlayStation and Nintendo have a very robust ecosystem of their own, with their own storefronts and their own subscriptions that they likely don't want to go away from anytime soon. Now, they could always bring their storefront to PC later down the road, and honestly, I could see a future where PlayStation would possibly do that because they already support PC to some extent. But Nintendo, on the other hand, that's where it kind of seems unlikely that they would do it anytime soon. So his use of trapped, I think, is referring to that specifically, but it is a fun idea to think about. I think in some ways, the idea of a super console or a PC that literally just supports everything out of the box without tinkering in this, that, and the other, that sounds really good on paper for consumers. But at the same time, would these companies support that? And that's where you're going to start to get a little bit of a holdup. What do you think, though? Do you think that there's a possibility that this vision could come true in the future? And if so, what's your timeline? Do you think it's going to happen in the next 10 years? Do you think that it could happen in the next 20 years? Let me hear it in the comments below. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell. Happy New Year, and peace out.